Thanks everyone for joining us this morning. Just want to say the thing that I really love about webinars, or that I appreciate most, is the fact that people share their time with us. Means a lot to me. Um, and yeah, so we're very excited that we've got you with us this morning. Um, I guess without further ado, maybe I'll just introduce myself quickly, and then my co-host Stefan, he can introduce himself. My name is Mike. I am head of e-commerce insights here at Smarter E-commerce, also known as smec. I've got a background in retail operations. I've done everything from driving forklifts and stocking shelves to managing electronic catalogs and purchasing, getting to buyer and vendor relationships, all kinds of stuff. And for the last several years now, I've been focused on the e-commerce side of retail, and particularly Google Ads, Google Shopping. So that's kind of my expertise. Stefan, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. It's nice being here, having this webinar together. So my name is Stefan. I'm one of the founders of Metoda. And my basic role at the moment is taking care of our product management. We have some really fantastic ideas there to, in the area of Amazon ads, as you probably know. And I think that's it for now. We have lots of topics to cover, and it will be quite a unique webinar, I feel.
Yeah, I feel that way too, Stefan. We've been having fun putting this together, even down to the final minutes. We always enjoy ourselves. So let's get into the content. Or we're going to tease you with an agenda here. We'll just tell you a quick word about our companies. Don't worry, I won't spend too much long. It's not a sales show or anything like that. On the agenda, we're going to talk about macro data and key trends that are feeding into the holiday environment coming ahead of us. I think it's never too early to start planning for your holidays. So I'm glad that you feel that way too and you joined us. We'll discuss later on how to win customers a smart way, because that's actually a big trade-off or challenge in the holidays, is to actually make sure you're supporting your business in the best way possible. And then we'll also get into some statistics and data at the end to help illustrate some of the things that we're talking about. So a word about our companies quickly. smec, where I'm employed, I've been here for 6 out of 15 years that the company's been around. And we've got over 360 clients. We are kind of heavily focused into retail. We have some brands as well, though. So multi-brand retail, and yeah, we really enjoy supporting our clients, particularly with Google Ads.
Well, and let me also have a short introduction to Metoda. So we are focused pretty much on Amazon ads, in terms of optimizing it, writing smart AI, and providing insights, especially in these times, for reducing ad spend waste and stuff like this. And at the same time, we've built a full service agency that is supporting everything around basically Amazon, and a bit broader also e-commerce for brands and retailers.
So there you have it. You're with two of the greats in two of the great channels, Amazon and Google. And yeah, I think what's cool is that we're both in that technology and service combination. But Stefan, will you take us through some macro?
Yes, please start with the first slide.
Perfect.
So probably you read about all of these headlines here. We have lots of discussions. Is the world on the brink of a global recession? We see not only these headlines, but we also hear about in the market every day about layoffs and stuff like this. So times are definitely uncertain, but no one really knows where this is going. And that's why I wanted to bring up this guy here. If I had such a talk already in a physical setup, and I was asking who knows this guy. I guess one of the audience really knew him. And maybe next slide, because this is basically this is the Jeff Bezos of the older generation, of the earlier generation. This is the founder of Walmart. And in the end, if you think about a recession, he was asked what he would say, and he said, "I was asked that what I thought about the recession. I thought about it and decided not to take part." And I think this is a very good statement And I took some time to research a little bit what the big 5 consulting companies would give as recommendation in times of crisis, in times of uncertainties. And there are 6 topics that I feel are worth looking at. So obviously it's about focusing on the existing customer. It's about analyzing stuff. It's also about thinking long-term, because crises don't last forever. And especially when you think about the pandemic, when you're in a crisis, you really feel it's never ending. But if you're out of the crisis, you feel it's, wow, it was really fast in the end. And one thing I want to emphasize, and this is invest in growth engines, because it doesn't matter what you exactly do, but investing in times of crisis into your growth engines is a very, very smart move. And we feel that the growth engine, let's jump to the next slide maybe. The growth engine of our current time is definitely the e-commerce, because it got a real boost during the pandemic. So you saw very high growth rates in the e-commerce area. But also for the next years, it's still we still expect relatively high growth there compared to all other sectors or possible sales channels that you have at hand. And what we also feel that is now really kicking in is that you see, so the bankruptcies that we see rising at the moment due to the uncertainties are quite heavily happening in the brick and mortar retail industry. And we feel there are 2 good reasons to focus on the e-commerce now and very, very strategically. One thing that is not new, but we wanted to share it anyways. So the big players in the market, this is looking at some segments in the market of the biggest retail players. This shows pretty much that the market is concentrating. So the big players are growing higher than the average market is growing. And this is statistics for Germany and for UK, but it's basically similar also in the US and in other countries. And obviously, so if the market is concentrating, you also have to think about Amazon, because this is the most gigantic player in the market. And I mean, I'm not sure if it's 40% or 50% or somewhere in between, but Amazon has a huge share in the e-commerce market. So in the US, estimated according to this data, being around 40%. In Germany, it's around even a bit higher, around 50%. And what is maybe important to notice is what we also talked to with clients in the past months a lot. Amazon is still a growth driver. So if you think about the whole e-commerce, where you sometimes read headlines about maybe a stagnating returns at the moment, Amazon is still quite on top of the game. And that's why we also said we need to take a look at 2 big ad players specifically, because some of you, so all of our users and customers definitely know it. Amazon has also become a top ad platform by now. So it has emerged, I don't know, 2015 probably, starting with some experiments in the advertising space. But by now you see it on the light gray line. It is by far the fastest growing ad platform. And depending on the statistics that you take a look at, Amazon is now between the top 4 or top 3. So in the Western world, it's more the top 3, and in globally, it's the top 4 already. But we feel that Amazon will grow more, and at the same time, Google is still the biggest platform, and that's why we decided to go for these 2 ad channels in this webinar. And I mean, it's quite logical, I think. But if you have some ad platform that is growing really fast, you would expect that basically the returns are declining. And this is also what we see. So this is not data that we take from our systems, because that might be biased because of industry focus and stuff like this. But this is data that we calculate out of the investor report from Amazon every quarter. And what we see since basically Q1 2019, where the average Amazon return was at around 10, which is quite good. we see now that the average Amazon return in Q1 2023, some years later, is around 6 or even lower.
Yeah, and I've added in some Google numbers here, and it's pretty interesting. I mean, to me, I don't know. I was actually, my mind was blown a little bit when I saw these numbers side by side, because Amazon definitely had this claim of, if Google Ads it is performance marketing, you do get a high ROAS compared to, for example, meta advertising or paid social. Um, but then, let's say that meta is like mid funnel or even higher up the funnel with demand generation, and you've got Google as this demand capture channel that's really performant, then Amazon is like the bleeding tip of the spear with this very high performance. And they've actually become a lot more comparable. It's still ahead in terms of ROAS. But it's just quite interesting to see the way that these channels, Google already went through that saturation point in the past. Um, Both of them seem to have had some boosts in ROAS at different timing and different extent related to the pandemic. But now they're both at a rather stable and basically similar level to each other. I want to discuss that this is something I've looked at many times again and again for the last few years, and it's because I just find it so interesting, because Amazon is also one of, if not the largest advertiser in Google Ads. So not only is it a platform and a marketplace, but it's a retailer itself, and it advertises as a retailer, and it also advertises its sellers as a marketplace on Google Ads. And it has become for years now, a vast presence in Google Ads. So this chart here, these two charts are collected from the Auction Insights report, and it shows, the outranking share, how often Amazon is placed higher than advertisers. Also, the overlap rate, how often they're overlapping, and the impression share, like how many of the impressions that they could get do they get. And actually, already in November of 2018, they just exploded from this targeted experiment kind of phase to a very dominant position where they've stayed for years. They dropped out briefly in the pandemic, and CPCs also dropped right at that time, which was interesting. But getting toward the theme of this webinar, regarding these key dates, like Prime Day, the fall Prime Day, which will happen again. I think they call it like the early access sales event, but it's a fall Prime Day, which will occur again this year. And Black Friday, of course. We see that Amazon steps on the gas even more. They're already very dominant in these auctions. The number that you see here is competitor power, which is a way of kind of combining all of those auction insight metrics into one metric. And we see that they just step it up. And so in Germany, their strongest day of the year is Black Friday, by far. And compared to the median of 60%, they're 10% stronger, and that makes a difference. This will or can translate into performance impact for you as an advertiser. And yeah, it's basically something to be aware of going into the holidays. We're going to get back into some more data later on, but first we want to kind of get to this medium altitude. Let's move away from macro. Let's not get into this is kind of going to bridge us into some tactical conversations. But Stefan is going to present a framework that he and I were hashing out in some of our brainstorming sessions in recent weeks.
Yeah, thanks. So we thought what is most helpful to all of you to think about how to handle Amazon and basically Google, and how to manage basically all your ad and also conversion location setup. So we thought, let's come up with a framework that is very easy to understand. And so you have basically two dimensions here. The first dimension is the conversion location. That's the upper horizontal dimension. And you see this might happen on Amazon, or it might happen on your website or on your store. And then there's traffic sources, and the traffic sources might be either, so we're focusing on Amazon and Google, so you can imagine there are more, but let's say it might be Amazon or Google. And I think what is really important, also coming from the macro view, what we feel is there are some companies I've talked to, especially from the typical. No, please go
Oh,
just
back.
back.
Sorry. Left in.
Sorry, from the typical German Mittelstand, I would call them, and they are still not really active on Amazon. And I honestly, there's lots of strategic discussions around that, but I honestly don't get it because especially if we see now a weakening brick and mortar industry, Amazon can really secure your baseline revenue, and that's also what we believe is the role of Amazon. We also say you should not totally focus on Amazon because this will come with reduced profitability, with missing customer relationships, and so on. So that's why we definitely would recommend to have these two conversion locations in place. And the second conversion location, your store or your website, is basically about really winning the customer relationships, growing the customers on a long-term basis, making that a profitable customer lifetime setup in the end. So this is the base setup, yeah. And now we can talk about the next thing.
For sure.
This is now talking about the strategies, and there are four quadrants that we will take a look at. So if you're in the upper left quadrant, Amazon ads, then the traffic is coming through Amazon. It can be organically, but we're talking here about ads. So let's say it's coming through Amazon ads. And your conversion location is also at Amazon. This is the typical setup for everyone that is selling on Amazon. I guess without Amazon ads, without sponsored ads, to be very precise, you have a really hard time in increasing your sales. There's a second quadrant, and that's the upper right, which lots of people don't know about. And if you would ask me what could be the trend for 2024 in this space, I would say Amazon DSP link out, because Amazon has always been in the conflict of, am I a retailer or am I an ad platform? But the ad platform business is now so relevant and important that they are opening up with KPIs, with integrations, with whatsoever. And they also allow Amazon audiences, access to Amazon audiences for your link out campaigns. And I feel that this is a really powerful one.
Yeah, I think when you think about the amount of audience data that Amazon has, it's a very interesting DSP. Yeah, so if we just, if we're moving kind of clockwise around these quadrants here, we've gone through the first two, and let's come down to Google Ads. And now the classic here, so Google Ads is a traffic source to your web shop. And this is actually at this point almost exclusively what is possible on Google Ads, because there was this buy on Google program, where the conversion location, showing me the next quadrant, would have been on Google itself. But the program has been canceled. They could never get it to take off the ground. I think one thing that Google Ads made its name for is basically the fact that it could let even small companies stand shoulder to shoulder in an auction with very large dominant companies. And yeah, that it was this kind of customer acquisition and demand capture channel where you were paying to get that relationship. You were paying to send that customer to your landing page. And then, that could become part of your CRM, your retention, and you could build out a whole lifetime value strategy on top of that. And that was just super attractive. It offered a level of independence. And, I think in comparison to that, the buy on Google proposition, there were just problems there. It didn't have that, like, it was too much of a switch for retailers to accept. They wanted to own those customer relationships. And from a consumer standpoint, I think that the consumers weren't behaving this way either on Google. But if we move to that fourth quadrant, there is still an interesting effect occurring there, where the conversion location or the traffic source is Google, and the conversion location is not your web shop. And the possibility here is to use Google Ads to drive traffic to Amazon if you're on there. We're not going to get into this a lot, but we will talk about it in some detail. But let's maybe start moving down another level on this ladder from, strategies toward a more tactical side.
Yeah, and let's again start on the upper left quadrant. So if you think about Amazon ads, there's two basically tactics that you should run. So one is you should have a setup, well set up for always on campaigns. The focus here is obviously the return and basically incrementality. This is something that probably the discussion of branded traffic, non-branded traffic, but you should think about what is the return and what is the incrementality of your campaigns in an always on setup. The other thing is the seasonal campaigns. And here you can stick to sponsored ads, which is the classical one, leverage the high season traffic. Then you can decide on, do I want to be more aggressive or less? But what we would highly recommend and what we see in a base setup here is leveraging it also with the DSP, but not link out, but more a link to Amazon. Focus is obviously also the return, because we don't believe that campaigns without return are really making lots of sense. And it's potentially also new to brand as a metric. And let's shortly also talk about the DSP link out, which we have shortly touched upon before. So what we see here is basically it's true for always on and seasonal campaigns. So the focus should always be return. And yes, you can have well-performing link out campaigns through the DSP. But the most important part is, and this is true throughout the whole year and also through high seasons, is you have to learn the audiences, right? And if you know your audiences, you can highly leverage the, let's say, the increased conversion probability through high season times. But you first, in always on campaigns, need to learn about the audiences and obviously also the products and messages that you can place to the market.
If we're going to talk about Google Ads, again, going into a holiday period, like the first things are first. You need to again have your always on or evergreen campaigns. Your house needs to be in order. So most advertisers that we're seeing, about 80%, are using a target ROAS strategy in Google Ads, and yeah, that's not too surprising. So I do. If you've heard me talk before about ROAS, it's the best tool we have. It's the only tool we have. So definitely focus on that. But I encourage you to not think of it as the be all end all, and to remember to use it as a tool and a lever, and not just as a goal, because the goal of the channel is actually acquiring new customers. So you might, speaking of which, try this new customer only bidding model that's available in Performance Max, this new ish highly automated campaign type from Google. My warning there is that we've typically seen pretty low volumes coming out of new customer only mode. There are other options like bidding higher for new customers, but this is done by changing the way that your reporting works, and I can't really advocate for that. But you have to think hard about having kind of a healthy, excellent setup. And then your seasonal campaigns should really focus on product segmentation. This should be part of what you're doing anyway, but getting your assets nailed, your seasonal assets, that's more important than ever, particularly with Performance Max. It's, it is offering these other more visual formats. Shopping was already this visual leap from the text ads that Google Ads started out with. But you've got to nail this stuff. And really, assets, audiences, and segmentation are the name of the game there. When we're talking about this drive to Amazon strategy, there are some specialists out there who are into this. It's quite complicated, to be honest, because you run the risk of competing against Amazon, because Amazon's also trying to drive traffic to Amazon, even on your behalf, potentially, since they'll do some seller ads. And you are going to just really massively compete against them. So you can dig deep into your auction insights at the retail category level, for example, and try to find if there are categories that are working for you that you want to push that seems like Amazon is not pushing as well as you could. But it is quite complicated about how to do this, track this, not cannibalize. So it's a rather advanced tactic. If you are a big seller on Amazon and you are also advertising on Google, then you need to be aware of the effects. Um, yeah, so I was talking about getting the fundamentals right earlier, and just to get into some more detail there about what that can mean. Um, it's not just like about the basics; it's really the brilliant basics. There's kind of this idea that you need to do everything 10x or something like that, and I value that philosophy, but I think it's also important to remember that um, if you just do every day 1% better, this compounds over time. And it's way less intimidating and way more feasible than thinking in a 10x mindset, because most of your competitors are not getting 1% better every day. So I encourage you to really think about brilliant basics as well. In There's this concept of retail readiness from Amazon, and I think there's also an extent to which you can apply this to Google. And they each platform takes sort of a different position here. You could call it the carrot and the stick. Google is taking more of a carrot approach when it comes to retail readiness, because right now the fact is that Google Shopping offers an extremely uneven experience to consumers. The pricing is not consistent. The pricing is not, you don't on Amazon, you're going on there, you're going to expect good pricing. On Google Shopping, it's honestly all over the place. Um, and this new program, the Merchant Scorecard, helps reward you with increased visibility when you're offering a good customer experience. Meanwhile, Amazon, on the other hand, and Stefan can speak to this better than I can, but they'll typically penalize you. Like if you have an out of stock, that's going to penalize you. And so it's really kind of an opposite proposition there, where they're just in a stronger, more established position on customer experience, and they enforce it. Whereas Google is trying to nurture it in the first place. Um, this idea of product segmentation I mentioned earlier, Stefan and I were both talking a lot about like this Boston Consulting Group matrix, if you've seen that before, but any kind of quadrant analysis can be really helpful here. There's simple frameworks for Google Ads as well. For example, a volume and efficiency matrix. You've probably heard of terms like zombie products or leaders and bleeders, stuff like this. But you can get a lot more advanced on that when you don't just think about historical performance, but also try to get into predictive and try to increase the number of dimensions that you're looking at. So not just this XY dimension of volume and efficiency, but what kind of a Z axis might there be, like in terms of like our ability to fulfill this item, or things going on in our own inventory. Um, and yeah, we already talked a bit about planning and scaling the campaigns. Um, Another thing that I just want to mention quickly here is the importance of testing. Particularly in Google Ads, it's quite easy to do. I think it might not be as easy to achieve in Amazon, but at smec, we highly recommend geo-testing. Um, Google will also be rolling out user-based testing in the UI soon. But with geo-testing, you can use, if you Google Match Markets, you can use, there are these Python packages that are readily available. It does take a bit of work, but you've got full control out of the whole testing setup. And you get the benefit of Google's data science and methodology in this Python package, but then you ultimately have the say, and you know that nothing's being manipulated behind the scenes or something. I'm not saying that Google would manipulate experiments that occur inside their UI, but they could. And it's great to just have that level of transparency and control. You can see every line of the code yourself. Um, and let's just continue on here with a look at some statistics around. I'll share a few about Google Ads, and Stefan will wrap up with a few about Amazon. Um, so we mentioned pricing a couple times here. It was maybe me, somebody once said that pricing is the new bidding in Google Ads. because bidding is now handled by Google. And pricing is one of the biggest signals out there that can impact, yeah, basically your click-through rates. It can impact like how favorably you're going to be displayed relative to competitors. Google finally, after like 2, 3 years, rolled out an automated discounting tool, and this will see increased adoption. It's dynamic repricing. So you need to be definitely aware of your pricing strategy. And this chart here just demonstrates. I mean, if you look at everything like on the x-axis here, the horizontal axis, we're seeing the difference from the benchmark price. And as soon as you're at 0 to 5% above the benchmark price, your conversion rate is below average in the example that we see here. And everything to the left of that benchmark price, everything that's cheaper than benchmark price, is at or above the conversion rate. So, you need to do the math there, that this works out to you. But we see that price demand elasticity is manifest in these auctions. And then you need to think about how that intersects with your profitability and your needs. Um, Another topic here regarding Black Friday is like average order value looks fantastic on Google Ads for Black Friday. This blue column is the average order value of Black Friday compared to every other Friday that we saw last year. And it's heads and shoulders above every other Friday. But I do invite you to think a level deeper than that, because this is kind of potentially a bit misleading. Are you actually acquiring a high value customer just because average order values were higher on Black Friday? That's not necessarily the case. And the only way you can determine that is to look at cohorts and find out, okay, the cohort of people, of customers that I acquired on past Black Fridays, over time, were they actually as brand loyal? Were they actually having the same repeat rate? Or were they just looking around for a discount and great AOV on that first order was fantastic, but after that, the whole thing fell apart? What kind of customer are you acquiring in these events? And it's another question here. We see that conversion rates, they balloon at this time of year, and particularly at Black Friday. Um, but there's a question here, like, okay, um, am I actually capturing incremental new demand that I wouldn't have captured otherwise across the period by running these promotions, by playing the Black Friday game, the Amazon Prime Day game? Or are we just concentrating that demand into a feeding frenzy where consumers are trained to look for discounts, where brand loyalty collapses on that day, everyone's shopping for a bargain? And these are the things you need to realize, that these holiday events are a double-edged sword, because they could be make or break for your year, but they could also be make or break for your next quarter or your next year because of what kind of customers you've acquired or not acquired during that time.
Well, and I mean, what you should also have in mind is that the search behavior around high season times is a bit different. So around high deal times, especially. So we see this not only on Prime Day, but we see this also on Black Friday and Cyber Week. So this chart is looking at data across 5 markets on Amazon, and we've analyzed the search terms, that the top search terms in the markets, and we compared it to the data before Prime Day. And what you can see basically in all of the markets is, so the green one is the branded traffic, and the blue one is the generic traffic. We have some some traffic estimates behind, and you can see that in all of the market, the share of branded traffic is increasing. It's in Germany even almost doubling. And this is, I mean, also logical. So shoppers are looking for bargains. So, but if you think about also maybe competitor attack strategy, you should be aware that this traffic will potentially skyrocket in these days. And next to this, there is one of the, I think this is, well, everyone should know about that, but this is distribution patterns of paid visibility. And we are every now and then analyzing this on Cyber Week, Prime Day, and other events. And what we always see in the market, there is the low budget scenario. And this basically is a brand or retailer that is visible in the early morning. And then the visibility is massively reduced throughout the day. We see a second typical behavior. This is a very high budget company. And here typically they start out in the morning with, well, let's say some kind of a visibility, base visibility. And in the afternoon, when all the other players with a low budget and a wrong, basically also bidding and budget strategy, when they are off the market, they will increase their visibility. And then there is the low bid scenario, and this is maybe just interesting. So if you have a low budget, you should also have a low bid per se, I would say. But this is typically looking like this. So you start on your average visibility level, then your visibility level will increase while the others go out of budget. And then maybe later on, you will also run out of budget, and then you see a curve like this. And I just want to make you aware that this is true for all times. For every day, this is happening. But for high season times, this is really critical because especially if you have a deal planned in the afternoon, you should not run out of budget during these times. And just a final slide, because I wanted to also bring some statistics on the campaigns, DSP versus sponsored ads, so sponsored ads as the search ads. And what we compare here is 3 KPIs. The first chart is looking at ad spend. The second is looking at the revenue that is generated through the ads. And the third is looking at the returns. And we here have a customer case that decided, maybe for good reasons, to have a very static budget on Prime Day versus the 30 days before. And you can see that this is the blue line, the sponsored ad setup, that the revenue is nevertheless increasing tremendously by 55%. So the return is around the same level because the budget compared to this 30 days before was a bit lower. But what you can also see here, and that's why I was emphasizing the DSP as an actually must-have for high season times. On the DSP, we decided with the customer to increase the budget by 40%, which in the end led to more than 200% increase in revenues, and then obviously also massively increased the ROAS, or more than doubled it. Just that you have some statistics, what is happening with the different ad possibilities on Amazon.
Yeah, that's super interesting with DSP. I think it's a bit slept on. So let's just wrap this up because I heard my timer go off a second ago. Sorry about that. And with the summary, and we'll get into the question and answers. I see there's one question in there, but keep sending them through. So to summarize a bit here, we're seeing market concentration, which is affecting or let's describe, there's a couple things. There's market concentration occurring, there's channel saturation occurring. These are separate but related effects. And this can ultimately damage the profitability or the returns of channels. We feel that having a unified strategy between Google and Amazon is more important than ever because basically these two channels serve different purposes. They reach to a certain extent overlapping, but to a certain extent unique audiences. They'll have a different role in your business. But if you look at that kind of quadrant or matrix that we shared with you earlier, finding that right balance between I'm owning the relationship and I'm letting this really big and effective distribution channel work for me, finding that balance is super important. As I mentioned, brilliant basics. So think about Google scorecard, think about your feed health in Google, everything down to your title optimization. There's new tools coming out all the time. There's this AI tool called Feed Gen. Check out all the stuff. Look at your Amazon retail readiness because you need to be ready for game time. And that's generally true, but you'll feel the pain more in the holiday period. And then these high season times that are ahead of us, a few months out, but never too early to prepare. You need to be ready in terms of your pricing. You need to be ready in terms of your creatives, your assets, your audiences. We see this of increased importance in Performance Max, in Amazon with the DSP audiences, just year after year, they become more important. And as we head into like this cookieless world, this could affect Google more than Amazon, which is kind of this closed looped attribution. But we just need to find every tool and every foothold that we can going on those. So I see a couple more questions rolling in. Thank you for those, and thanks so much for listening so far. We really appreciate that. Um, let's dig into a couple of these. I see a question. Wouldn't you expect to see a more significant conversion rate drop just before these shopping events, especially Black Friday? So I think that's related to the conversion rate slide I shared before. Um, Absolutely, conversion rate can drop before as people are waiting for bargains. Um, but you might also just generally see you might see that it's a little less manifest in the conversion rate. You just might see lower volumes, but yeah, for sure, I'd have to look at that chart again if not really a big dip was visible there. But I think it's totally fair to expect a conversion rate dip before the holidays as people are waiting. And that's that seasonal concentration effect. Or it's
By the way,
grabbing.
that's also happening in Amazon Ads.
Mhm.
But it's very much industry specific. So if you're in more the consumables industry, it's probably less happening. If you're in the if you have high price goods, then you will definitely see it.
Yep, yep. So think about your AOV. What category are you in? Are you a nice to have or a must have kind of product? Um, Regarding the Amazon auction power in Google Ads, are there more recent charts to see how much dominance has changed since December 2019? So that the next slide that I showed, which had like the Prime Day events, that was current data. Um, but I don't have that bubble chart available like that, although I can. Yeah, remind me. Maybe we can send it in the email blast, the email follow up. But let me just one real quick word. They fell out of the auctions during pandemic briefly, and they came back quite dominant, but not quite as dominant as they were before. And by the way, we see new players like Timu stepping in. Timu is very much in that pre-explosion phase where Amazon was. Another question: we currently have a lot of budget on PPC with Google. However, we're about to start PPC on Amazon. Will this cause conflict with Google shopping results? Um,
That's a good question. Honestly, I wouldn't have an answer to that. That would probably be quite an interesting experiment out of this after the webinar.
yeah, there is definitely the possibility for cannibalization, and I think it depends because um, are you 80% on Amazon and 20% on Google? Are you 80% on Google, 20% on Amazon? If you're spending a significant amount of money on both channels, you need to look at this and think about this for sure, because you could cause some cannibalization effects. Um, we know PMax uses all types of signals to find users and audiences and retarget existing users. Does this not make audiences a little less relevant for PMax? Interesting question. I can't really agree with that. I think that Google is very hungry for your first party audience data. They're looking for your customer match list. They're looking for signals that you can give them, and it's just important to remember that they're not in Performance Max. They're not targeting signals. It's more like the metaphor I always make. Instead of choosing an album or a playlist on Spotify that you want to listen to those songs, um, or choosing a genre, like it's like clicking one song and then letting out Spotify's algorithm decide what it's going to play next, and it goes from there. But I no, I think audiences are of increased importance, like compared to smart shopping, which didn't support audiences. I think it's something you can control, you should control. There are all kinds of tactics out there, like how to put in your competitors' URLs and make sure you're targeting people who have visited competitor websites. There's lots of stuff you can get into there. We're just about at the time box, I think. But are there more questions out there? People getting hungry for lunchtime? Then If there's nothing else, then thank you for those questions. Hold on, am I? Oh man, there's more. Sorry, I was not scrolling on here. If you got to leave, thanks for your time. If you want to stay on and hear the rest of these questions, we can try to run through them. With non-brand demand dipping during Black Friday sales, as brand demand rises, would you recommend going harder on non-brand in the 2 weeks before sale, in order to make sure that you're top of mind when the sale hits?
Um,
Um, yeah, Stefan?
So I think yes, because this is also what we meant in Amazon ads. You should have a seasonal strategy and a non-seasonal, always on strategy, and this is also basically referring to the targeting setting of your campaigns. So what we typically do is in high season times, we very much focus on focus. We call this focus targets. It might be an audience, or it might be a keyword, for example, or a competitor listing. And this is typically what we try to really leverage around the high season time then.
Thanks, Stefan. There's another question. What's your take on the growth and funneling of traffic towards Amazon that's happening lately, both via Amazon ads and externally via search ads? Will conversions happening more often on the Amazon landscape or in Amazon's environment dilute brand awareness and therefore search volume for branded keywords over time on Google? Um, Complex question there, yeah. So what do I think about that happening lately? I can't even say lately because it's just been going on for years at this point. And I mean, that's one thing I would say. If we take on a hypothesis that this dilution of Google search volume will occur, then I think that it has been occurring. I don't think that that's something that would newly start happening. um, but yeah, it's a great question. Also, as new players emerge like Temu, Shein, all kinds of offerings are going to be coming up. We're going to increasingly see these Eastern e-commerce companies or APAC e-commerce companies. They've been accessing the West through Western platforms, and now they're going to keep offering new platforms of their own. And so I think that it is a super tricky time. But on the other hand, like when it comes to this topic about brand, um, they're not necessarily going to be participating in brand traffic. They'll have their own offers. I have to think about that in more detail. Do you have anything to say about that, Stefan?
Not really at the moment. I think one maybe it's maybe another aspect which we don't touch here, but it's probably very much depending also on the industry, on the brand, and so on. Yeah, what will definitely happen is that I guess social selling will also emerge in the next years. So this will be a very key part: TikTok, Instagram, whatsoever. But yeah, another topic.
Yeah, social selling. We could have a whole thing about that because
Yeah,
I'm a bit of a social selling skeptic, but I agree it has to be observed.
yeah.
Um, Another question: do you think that Google's best practice for segmenting products by different margin levels is the best way to segment products for shopping? I have mixed feelings there, right? Well, I have mixed feelings about that too. I think that it's there's kind of a ladder of getting toward more profitable ads, and this is a step on the ladder, and it's something that's pretty easy to implement. Um, but when we compare the results we've seen with that method compared to directly tracking profit, it's a world of difference. And it also depends the quality of like the kind of the methodology that you bring toward margin segmentation, because there's very bad ways of segmenting by margin. It's not always obvious the correct way. But Stefan, I'm wondering, because I know margin is a big topic in Amazon ads, and there's commissions in there. Like, how do you determine which products are profitable enough to be on Amazon?
I think I mean this. I think the most important part on Amazon is to really know your margins properly. Yeah, I think
Mm,
this is the first issue, and most players that we work with have a hard time really calculating that properly.
mm.
And I mean, um, yeah, there's a mix between in the end your ads and your organic listing and placement and so on. So that's a pretty complex question, I would say. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. I see. We've seen it all. We see companies where they have their margins, but the marketing teams are not allowed to know about it or see it or use it, and it's like the holy grail. And
Maybe adding something to Google marketing, what we've also seen on your price bin chart. So we have worked with many price comparison websites in the past. So we also took a look at data from these companies. And what we always see is that not only in Google marketing, it's true in Google shopping, but it's also true on price comparison websites. If you have a bad price positioning, you might get clicks, but you definitely get no conversions. And this is so I'm not sure if margin segmentation is then the right thing. Maybe more being pretty aware of the price positioning.
mhm, mhm. There's one last question, unless anyone wants to ask something else. Feel free to. I've got a few more minutes. Um, how would you test the uplift brought by first party data audiences? So if we're talking about Google Ads, and like adding those audience signals to PMAX, for example, well, basically, I mentioned earlier Google matched markets being used for geo-based split testing. This would be a use case for that. You can have, um, you can create a test where you've got campaigns with these signals added and without, and then you can use a geo-testing approach to compare the results of those. But I would also stress, don't only rely on what the platform is telling you for results, also check on your analytics or your backend or another source of truth. Do you have any thoughts about measuring the uplift of audience data, Stefan?
Well, we for the DSP, it's really critical,
Mhm.
obviously,
Yeah.
and we're trying to be very specific with the audiences and with the line item setups and so on. And especially if you talk about link out campaigns, because in link out campaigns, depending on your setup, you don't want might not want to have the tracking pixel from Amazon installed in your own website. And that's why you really have to think about how do you do the audience tracking, right? And this is then a topic of how to set up the campaigns more in a more granular way and so on.
Mhm. Um, thanks for all the great questions. Is there anything else? Last call. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap it there then. So thanks so much again for your time and your attention and your engagement in this webinar. And um,
Mike, it was really fun.
it was, we said before, we said it would be fun, didn't we? It was fun. Thank you, Stefan. Thanks to the audience. Bye, everyone.